Happy Star Wars Day, everybody. Tonight, I'm going to read to you chapter 11 of Star Wars A New Hope, episode 4, A New Hope. Chapter 11, here we go. Dazed, Luke staggered toward the front of the ship. He barely noticed the sound of energy bolts too weak to penetrate the ship's deflectors exploding harmlessly outside. His own safety was currently of little concern to him. With misty eyes, he stared as Chewbacca and Solo adjusted controls. I hope that old man managed to knock out that tractor beam, Han was saying, or this is going to be a very short ride, or very short trip. Ignoring him, Luke returned to the hold area and slumped into his seat, his head falling into his hands. Leia Organa regarded him quietly for a while, then removed her cloak. Moving toward him, she placed it gently around his shoulders. There wasn't anything you could have done, she whispered comfortingly. It was all over in an instant. I can't believe he's gone, came Luke's reply, his voice a ghost of a whisper. I can't. Solo shifted a lever, staring nervously ahead, but the massive bay door was constructed to respond to the approach of any vessel. The safety feature now served to facilitate their escape as the freighter slipped quickly slipped quickly past the still opening door and out into free space. Nothing, Solo sighed, studying several readouts with profound satisfaction. Not so much as an erg of come hither. He did it all right. Speaking of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Chewbacca rumbled something and the pilot's attention shifted to another series of gauges. Right, Chewie, I forgot for a moment that there were other ways of persuading us to return. His teeth flashed in a grin of determination, but the only way they'll get us back in that traveling tube is in pieces. Take over. Whirling, he ran out of the cockpit. Come with me, kid, he shouted at Luke as he entered the hold. We're not out of this yet. Luke didn't respond, didn't move, and Leia turned and aimed his face at Solo. Leave him alone. Can't you see what the old man meant to him? An explosion jarred the ship, nearly tumbling Solo to the deck. So what? The old man gave himself to give us a chance to get away. You want to waste that, Luke? You want Kenobi to waste it himself? Luke's head came up and stared with vacant eyes at the curling. No, not quite vacant. There was something too old and unpleasant shining blindly in the back of them. Without a word, he threw off the cloak and joined Solo. Giving him a reassuring smile, Solo gestured down a narrow axway. Luke sorry, Luke looked in the indicated direction. Indicated direction, smiling grimly, and rushed down it as Solo started down the opposite passage. Luke found himself in a large rotating bubble protruding from the side of the ship. A long, wicked-looking tube whose purpose was instantly apparent projected from the apex of the transparent hemisphere. Luke settled himself into the seat and commenced a rapid study of the controls. Activated here, firing here. He had fired such weapons 1,000 times before in his dreams. Forward, Chewbacca and Leia were searching the speckled pit outside for the attacking fighters, represented by fire pricks on several screens. Chewbacca suddenly growled throatily and pulled back on several controls as Leia let out a yelp. Here they come. The starfield wheeled around Luke as an Imperial TIE fighter raced toward him and then swung overhead to vanish into the distance. Within the tiny cockpit, its pilot frowned as a supposedly battered freighter darted out of range. Adjusting his own controls, he swung up and over in a high arc, intended to take him on a fresh intercept course with the escaping ship. Solo fired at another fighter, and his pilot nearly slammed his engine through its mountains as he fought to avoid the powerful energy bolts. As he did so, his hurried maneuver brought him under and around to the other side of the freighter. Even as he was lowering the glare reflector over his eyes, Luke opened up on the racing fighter. Chewbacca was alternating his attention between the instruments and the tracking screens, while Leia strained to separate distant stars from nearby assassins. Two fighters dove simultaneously on a twisting, spiraling freighter, trying to align their weapons on an unexpectedly flexible craft. Solo fired at the descending globes, and Luke followed with his own weapon a second later. Both fired on the starship and then shot past. They're coming in too fast, Luke yelled into his comlink. Another enemy bolt struck the freighter forward and was barely shunted aside by its deflectors. The cockpit shuddered violently, and gauges whined and protested the quantity of energy they were being asked to monitor and compensate for. Chewbacca muttered something to Leia, and she murmured a soft reply, as if she almost understood. Another fighter unloosed a barrage on the freighter, only this time the bolt pierced an overloaded screen and actually struck the side of the ship. Though partially deflected, it still carried enough power to blow out a large control panel in the main passageway, sending a rain of sparks and smoke in all directions. R2-D2 started stolidly toward the miniature inferno as the ship lurched crazily, throwing the less stable 3PO into a cabinet full of component chips. A warning light began to wink for attention in the cockpit. Chewbacca muttered to Leia, who stared at him worriedly and wished for the gift of Wookiee gab. Then the fighter floated down on the damaged freighter right into Luke's sights. His mouth moved silently. Luke fired at it. The incredibly agile little vessel darted out of its range, but as it passed beneath them, Solo picked it up instantly and commenced a steady following fire. Without warning, the fighter erupted into incredible flash of multicolored light, throwing a billion bits of superheated metal to every section of the cosmos. Solo whirled and gave Luke a victory wave, which the younger man gleefully returned. Then they turned back to their weapons as yet another fighter stormed over the freighter's hull, firing at its transmitter dish. In the middle of the main passageway, angry flames raged around a stubby cylindrical shape. A fine white powdery spray issued from R2-D2's head. Wherever it touched, the fire retreated sharply. Luke tried to relax to become a part of the weapon. Almost without being aware of it, he was firing at a retreating Imperial. When he blinked, it was to see the flaming fragments of the enemy craft forming a perfect ball of light outside the turret. It was his turn to spin and flash the Corellian a grin of triumph. In the cockpit, Leia paid close attention to scattered readouts, as well as searching the sky for additional ships. She directed her voice toward an open mic. There's still two more of them out there. It looks like we've lost the lateral monitors and the starboard deflector shield. Don't worry, Solo told her, with as much hope as confidence. She'll hold together. He gave the walls a pleading stare. You hear me, ship? You hold together. Chewie, try to keep them off the port side. He was forced to break off as the TIE fighter seemed to materialize out of nowhere, energy bolts reaching out from it towards him. Its companion craft came up on the freighter's other side. Then Luke found himself firing steadily at it. Excuse me, ignoring the immensely powerful energy it threw at him. At the last possible instant, before it passed out of range, he swung the weapon's nozzle minutely, his finger tightening convulsively on the fire control. The Imperial fighter turned into a rapidly expanding cloud of phosphorescing dust. Phosphorescing dust. The other fighter apparently considered the shrunken odds, turned and retreated at top speed. We made it, Leia shouted, turning to give the startled Wookiee an unexpected hug. He growled at her, very softly. Darth Vader strode into the control room where Governor Tarkin stood, staring at a huge, brilliantly lit screen. It displayed a sea of stars, but it was not the spectacular view which absorbed the governor's thoughts at the moment. He barely glanced around as Vader entered. Are they away? The Dark Lord demanded. They just completed the jump to hyperspace. No doubt that they are at the very moment congratulating themselves on their daring and success. Now Tarkin turned to face Vader, a hint of warning in his tone. I'm taking an awful chance, Vader, on your insistence. This had better work. Are you certain the homing beacon is secure aboard this ship? Vader exuded confidence beneath the reflective black mask. There is nothing to fear. This will be a day long remembered. It has already been witnessed in the final extinction of the Jedi. Soon you will see the end of the Alliance and the rebellion. That's not what he said in the movie, though. He said, this will be a day long remembered. It has seen the end of Kenobi. It would soon see the end of the rebellion. That's what's in the movie. Now, moving on. Solo switched places with Chewbacca, the Wookiee grateful, for the opportunity to relinquish the controls. As the Corellian moved out to check the extent of the damage, a determined-looking Leia passed him in the corridor. What do you think, sweetheart? Solo inquired, well pleased with himself. Not a bad bit of rescuing. You know, sometimes I amaze even myself. That doesn't sound too hard, Leia admitted readily. The important thing is not my safety, but the fact that the information in the R2 droid is still intact. What's that droid carrying that's so important anyway? Leia considered the blazing starfield forward. Complete tactical schematics of the battle station. I only hope that when the data is analyzed, a weakness can be found. Until then, until the station itself is destroyed, we must go on. This war isn't over yet. It is for me, objected the pilot. I'm not in this mission for the revolution. Economics interests me, not politics. There's business to be done under any government, and I'm not doing it for you, princess. I expect to be well paid for risking my ship and my hide. You needn't worry about your reward, Leia assured him sadly, turning to leave. If money is what you love, then that's what you receive. On leaving the cockpit, she saw Luke coming forward and she spoke softly to him in passing. Your friend is indeed a mercenary. I wonder if he really cares about anything or anybody. Luke stared at her until she disappeared into the main hold area, then whispered, I do. I care. Then he moved into the cockpit and sat in the seat Chewbacca anticipated. What do you think of her, Han? Solo didn't hesitate. Try not to, kid. Luke probably hadn't intended his response to be audible, but Solo overheard his murmur of good. Still, Solo ventured thoughtfully, she's got a lot of spirit to go with her sass. I don't know. You think it's possible for a princess and a guy like me? No. Luke cut him off sharply. He turned and looked away. Solo smiled at the young man's jealousy, uncertain in his own mind whether he had added the comment to bait his naive friend or because it was the truth. Yavin was not a habitable. The huge gas giant was patterned with pastel high-altitude cloud formations. Here and there, the softly lambent atmosphere was molded by cyclonic storms composed of 600-kilometer-per-hour winds, which boiled rolling gases of the Yavanesque troposphere. It was a world of lingering beauty and quick death for any who might try to penetrate to its comparatively small core of frozen liquids. Several of the giant planet's numerous moons, however, were planet-sized themselves, and of these, three could support humanoid life. Particularly inviting was the satellite designated by the system's discoverers as number 4. It shone like an emerald in Niavin's necklace of moons, rich with plant and animal life, but it was not listed among those worlds supporting a human settlement. Yavin was located too far from the settled regions of the galaxy. Perhaps the latter reason, or both, or a combination of causes still unknown, had been responsible for whatever race had once risen from Satellite 4's jungles, only to disappear quietly long before the first human explorer set foot on the tiny world. Little was known of them, save that they left a number of impressive findings, and that they were one of the many races which had aspired to the stars only to have their desperate reach fall short. Now all that remained were the mounds and foliage-clad clumps formed by jungle-covered buildings. Excuse me, buildings. But though they had sunk back into the dust, the artifacts in their world continued to serve an important purpose. Strange cries and barely perceptible moans sounded from every tree and copse, COPSE. Hoots and growls and strange mutterings issued from creatures content to remain concealed in the dense undergrowth. Whenever dawn broke over Moon the fourth, broke over Moon the fourth, heralding one of its long days. Over Moon the fourth. Hey, that's kind of weird reading. Weird writing. Whenever dawn broke over the fourth moon, over the fourth moon, there we go. Heralded one of its long days, and especially feral chords of shrieks and weirdly modulated strains would resound through the thick mist. Even stranger sounds surged continually from one particular place. Here lay the most impressive of these edifices, which a vanished race had raised toward the heavens. It was a temple, a roughly pyramidal structure so colossal that it seemed impossible it could have been built without the aid of the modern gravitonic, gravitonic construction techniques. Yet all evidence pointed only to simple machines, hand technology, and perhaps devices alien and long lost. While the science of this moon's inhabitants had led them to a dead end as far as off-world travel was concerned, they had produced several discoveries which in certain ways surpassed similar imperial accomplishments, one of which involved a still unexplained method of cutting and transporting gargantuan blocks of stone from the crust of the moon. From these monstrous blocks of solid rock, the massive temple had been constructed. The jungle had scaled even its soaring crest, clothing it in rich green and brown. Only near its base, in the temple front, did the jungle slide away completely to reveal a long, dark entrance cut by its builders and enlarged to suit the needs of the structure's present occupants. A tiny machine, its smooth metal sides and silvery hue incongruous amidst the all-persuasive green, appeared in the forest. It hummed like a fat, swollen beetle as it conveyed its cluster of passengers toward the open temple base. Crossing a considerable clearing, it was soon swallowed up by the dark maw in the front of the massive structure, leaving the jungle once more in the paws and claws of invisible scrawlers and screechers. The original builders would never have recognized the interior of their temple. Seamed metal had replaced rock, and poured paneling did surface the chamber division in place of the wood. Nor would they have been able to see the buried layers excavated into the rock below, layers which contained hanger upon hanger, linked by powerful elevators. A land speeder came to a gradual stop within the temple, whose first level was the uppermost of those ship-filled hangars. Its engine died obediently as the vehicle settled to the ground. A noisy cluster of humans waiting nearby ceased their conversation and rushed toward the craft. Fortunately, Leia Organa quickly emerged from the speeder, or the man who reached it first, might have pulled it bodily from it. So great was his delight at the sight of her. He settled for giving her a smothering hug as his companions called their own greetings. You're safe. We feared you'd been killed. Abruptly, he composed himself, stepping away and executed a formal bow. When we heard about Alderaan, we feared the worst. We were afraid that you were lost along the rest of the population. All that is past history, Commander, she said. Leia said. We have a future to live for. Alderaan and its people are gone. Her voice turned bitter, cold, frightening in so delicate looking a person. We must see that such does not happen again. We don't have time for our sorrows, Commander, she continued briskly. The battle station has surely tracked us here. Solo started to protest, but she shut him up with a logical, stern look. That's the only explanation for the ease of our escape. They only sent 4 TIE fighters after us. They could as easily have launched 100. Solo had no reply for that, but he continued to fume silently. Then Leia gestured to R2D2. We must use the information locked in this R2 droid to form a plan of attack. It's our only hope. The station itself is more powerful than anyone suspected. Her voice dropped. If the data does not yield a weakness, there will be no stopping. Luke was then treated to a sight unique in his experience, unique in most men's. Several robo technicians walked up to R2D2, positioned themselves around him, and gently hoisted him in their arms. This was the first and probably the last time we would ever see a robot being carried respectfully by men. Theoretically, no weapon could penetrate the exceptionally dense stone of the ancient temple. But Luke had seen the shattered remains of Alderaan and knew that for those in the incredible battle station, the entire moon represents simply another abstract problem in mass energy conversion. Little R2D2 rested comfortably in the place of honor, his body radiating computer and data bank hookups like a metal hairdo. On an array of screens and readouts nearby, the technical information stored on the submicroscopic record tape within the robot's brain was being played out. Hours of it, diagrams, charts, statistics. First, the rush of material was slowed and digested by more sophisticated computer minds. Then the most critical information was turned over to the human analysts for detailed evaluation. All the while, C-3PO stood close to R2, marveling at how so much complex data could be stored in the mind of so simple a droid. The central briefing room was located deep within the bowels of the temple. The long, low-ceilinged auditorium was dominated by a raised dais, and huge electronic display screen on its far end. Pilots, navigators, and a sprinkling of R2 units filled the seats. Impatient and feeling very out of place, Han Solo and Chewbacca stood as far away from the stage with his assemblage of officers and senators as possible. Solo scanned the crowd, searching for Luke. Despite some common sense entreaties, The crazy kid had gone and joined the regular pilots. He didn't see Luke, but he recognized the princess as she talked somberly with some be-mettled oldster. When a tall, dis, when a tall, dignified gentleman with too many deaths in his soul moved to stand by the far side of the screen. Excuse me, Solo turned his attention to him, as did everyone else. As soon as an expectant silence had gripped the crowd, General John Dodonna, Dodonna, adjusted the tiny mic on his chest and indicated the small group seated close to him. You all, you, you all know these people, he intoned with quiet power. They are the senators and generals whose worlds have given us support, whether open or covert. They have come to be with us in what may well prove to be a decisive moment. He let his gaze touch many in the crowd, and none who were so favored remained unmoved. The Imperial Station, the Imperial battle station you now have all heard of is approaching from the far side of Yavin and its sun. That gives us a little extra time, but it must be stopped once and for all before it can reach this moon, before it can bring its weaponry to bear on us, as it did on Alderaan. A murmur came through the crowd at the mention of that world, so callously obliterated. The station is heavily shielded and mounts more firepower than the half-empty fleet. Dodonna went on. But its defenses were designed to fend off large-scale capital ship assaults. A small 1 or 2 man fighter should be able to slip through its defensive screens. Excuse me, my apologies. A slim, supple man who resembled an older version of Han Solo rose. Dodonna acknowledged his presence. What is it really? The man gestured toward the display screen, which showed a computer portrait of the battle station. Pardon me for asking, sir, but what good are all its snub fighters going to be against that? Dodonna considered, well, the Empire doesn't think a one-man fighter is any threat to anything except on a small ship, like a TIE fighter, or they would provide tighter screens. Apparently, they've convinced their defensive weaponry can fend off any light attacks. But an analysis of the plans provided by Princess Leia, has revealed what we think is a weakness in the station's design. A big ship couldn't get near it, but an X-wing or Y-wing fighter might. It's a small thermal exhaust port. Its size belies its importance, as it appears to be an unshielded shaft that runs directly into the main reactor system powering the station. Since it serves as an emergency outlet for the waste heat in the event of reactor overproduction, its usefulness can be eliminated by particle shielding. A direct hit would initiate a chain reaction, which should destroy the station. Mutterings of disbelief ran through the room. The more experienced the pilot, the greater his expressed disbelief. I didn't say your approach would be easy. Dodonna admonished him. He gestured at the screen. You must maneuver straight in, down the shaft, level off in the trench, and skim the surface to this point. The target is only 2 meters across, or 2 meters wide in the movie. It would take a precise hit at exactly 90 degrees to reach the reactor's systematization. That's a big word. Systematization. Wow. The reactor system. I'm not going to try. Sorry. And only a director will start the complete chain reaction. It said the port wasn't particle shielded. However, it's completely ray shielded. That means no energy beams. You'll have to use proton torpedoes. A few of the pilots laughed humorously. One of them was a teenage fire jockey sitting next to Luke, who bore the unlikely name of Red Antilles. R2D2, which they're also seeing next to another Archie unit, who emitted a long whistle hopelessness. The 2 minute target at maximum speed with a torpedo unit. That's impossible even for a computer, but it's not impossible. Purchasing. I used to bullseye Walt rats on my T-16 back home. They're not much bigger than 2 meters. That's so. The rackishly uniformed youth. Youth noted derisively. Tell me, when you were going after your particular varmint, were there 1,000 other, what did you call it, Walt rats, armed with power rifles firing at you? He shook his head sadly. With all that firepower in the station director, this would take a little more than barnyard marksmanship. As if to confirm Antilles' pessimism, Dodonna indicated a string of lights on the ever-changing schematic. Take special note of these emplacements. There's a heavy concentration of firepower on the latitudinal axis, as well as several dense circumpolar clusters. Also, their few generators will probably create a large distortion, especially in and around the trench. I figure that maneuverability in that sector will be less than 0.3. This produces more murmurs and a few groans from the assembly. Remember, you must achieve a direct hit. Yellow squadron will cover for the red on the first run. Green will cover blue on the second. Any questions? A muted buzz filled the room. One man stood, lean and handsome. Too much so, it seemed to be ready to throw away his life for something as abstract as freedom. What if both runs fail? What happens after that? Dodonna smiled tightly. There won't be any after that. The man nodded slowly, understandingly, and sat down. Anyone else? Excuse me. Silence now, pregnant with expectation. The manuscripts, may the force be with you. Oh, may the force be with you. Like oil draining from a shallow pot, the seated ranks of men, women, and machines rose and flowed toward the exits. I'm going to stop there and I'll read the rest. See you guys later. Bye bye.